Well, good evening, everyone. It's nice to have you here in another episode of Sea Stories, a series of interviews with people that I feel like talking to. This is sponsored, of course, by the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race and by the American Schooner Association. And today we are really in for a treat. I've just finished reading a wonderful book called The Final Days of the Schooner America. It's the last days. And we've got the author here, David Gendell. David, say hi to everybody.
Yeah, hey Duncan. Excited to be here. I'm a fan of the show. I've watched a few episodes, and love what you're doing here. So it's an honor to be here with this group. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much. Those are all the right things to say to me. I love that. It's fantastic. We're going through a beautiful fall right now, and I've been working on the boat and trying to get through your book, and it's been a great time. A couple things before we get started, everyone. We will have, during this interview, we'll have a question and answer form running. So down at the bottom of your screens, you should see a Q&A. And we also have a chat box running. And if you would all just take a moment now and type in your chat box, and let's make sure we can all see what's going on. Just put the name of your town where you're logging in from. Let's take a look and see what we get, okay? All right. Oh my goodness gracious. Lothian, Wilmington, Bedford, Annapolis, Arnold, Margaret from Annapolis, Leesburg, Norfolk. It's all good. Oh, you guys are awesome. Wow. Wisconsin, get out of here. Love Wisconsin. I was a rifle instructor at a girls' camp in Wisconsin once. Of all crazy things. Minneapolis, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Looks like things are working. Now, as we get into this, my friend David Gendell has written a wonderful book, and it's really a two-part book. And I'm going to let David tell you a little bit about it. You all ready? All right.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Duncan. So again, I'm happy to be here. Thank you all for joining. The first book I wrote was about the Thomas Point Shoal Lighthouse, and it was released during the pandemic. So lots of virtual events. And as somebody that when you write the book and you're a lot of time in solitude, researching and writing and that sort of thing. You miss the connection with folks and the ability to get out into the world. So this has been a little bit more unique, having released this book in August, and but it's nice to be able to get back into this world because I know there's some folks that are geographically challenged, have not been able to get to any of the events on and around the Bay. So I'd like to welcome everybody that's joining, that's interested in this topic, interested in schooners. Tonight, I'm going to talk until about the 50-minute mark about the book and about the stories, and we'll save plenty of time at the end because I know there's going to be some questions, and America is one of those vessels that everybody seems to know and love, universally loved vessel. And here in Annapolis and all along the Bay, there's a lot of people that have hunks of wood from the Schooner America that they've been given or inherited, et cetera. So, I've got this hunk of Schooner America wood that was given to me by Fred Hecklinger, circa 2000. Fred came into my office and put this down on my desk and said, "Here, this is an interesting story. You should look into this." And I said, "What exactly do we have here, Fred?" And he said, "That's a piece of the True Cross." And he was referring to the 1851 Schooner America, which, I think we all know the cup is named after the vessel, not after the nation. So it's technically, America's cup, and that possessive S at the end of that phrase is about the schooner that brought the cup, won the cup in England in 1851. So I dove into this research project right around the very first months of the new century. And what was great at that point was there were still some folks alive and aware and switched on, excited to tell the story of what was happening in Annapolis during World War II, and remembered seeing America on the hard in Eastport during World War II. So I was able to meet with some of those folks, collect some of their memories and some of their stories, and at the same time, others were collecting oral histories of that cohort of folks. So Mike Myron was a historian here in Eastport, Annapolis. He's no longer with us, but Mike left behind hundreds of oral histories that he collected in the 90s and into the 2000s, which are housed at the Annapolis Maritime Museum. So I was able to dive into those, and then spent a lot of time at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and in College Park, Maryland, et cetera. And what I learned when I dove into this America story, that Fred initially pushed me down this road with that hunk of wood, that hunk of the true cross, was the America story doesn't stand on its own. It's intertwined with the story of the Annapolis Yacht Yard during World War II. And I'm speaking this evening. I keep an office in the building that was the offices of the Annapolis Yacht Yard, and where I'm standing right now actually overlooks the shop floor where the patrol torpedo boats were built. This is the office that the Navy officer that was in charge kept, and I rent it now from the current owners of the facility. But so I wrote this book in this office with this hunk of America on the desk, and the spot where America actually ended her life is just 100 or so feet away from me outside. So we'll dive into the story, but that's a bit of the background. And first I want to celebrate Russ Kramer, the marine artist out of Mystic, Connecticut, who is just extraordinary painter. And Russ did the image that's on the cover. I'll go back to give you another look. So we zoomed in, we made it vertical. We cut a section out of it. This is what the entire painting looks like. This is in a private hands now, but Russ has a wonderful website where he's got an entire gallery of paintings, and it's inspiring to go there every day and look at that every time I go there. You can see this is America in 1851 in the race around the Isle of Wight. The needles off the bow as she's rounding the Isle of Wight. Just a couple things I'll note in this image that are interesting that will pop into the story a little bit later. As you can see on the transom of this schooner is a large wooden carved eagle that's painted in gold gilt. That's one of America's iconic features, and that was mentioned in a lot of the contemporary press coverage when she was over there in 1851. That actually ended up disappearing after America was sold, and was found years later at a pub on the Isle of Wight where they had it on display. And someone from New York Yacht Club recognized it, and they were able to recollect that on behalf of the New York Yacht Club. So, that's very historically accurate that you see there. You'll also note that unique round cockpit. That's another special feature of America that you'll often see depicted, and artists will often call out that round cockpit. That round cockpit stayed with her entire career. I also point out that she's being steered by a tiller. America was the peak of innovation, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But America could be fit with a tiller for racing, more direct response, so 100+ foot schooner with the tiller. But they also could swap out and install a wheel for passage making and for deliveries. So an innovative feature. So you'll often see paintings of America with wheels or with the tiller. During the race around the Isle of Wight, she was fitted with this tiller. So Mr. Kramer has things very historically tight in this particular painting, as he always does. Looking ahead, this is a 70-foot wooden patrol torpedo vessel built at the Annapolis Yacht Yard, literally in the shadow of America 90 years after that famous victory. So how do these two stories come together, and how do they represent the story of ambition, a story of patriotism, a story of innovation, and a story of purpose-built vessels, which could not have been built for two more different purposes, yet come together in this narrative. So this was a challenge in the early years of putting this together. I had a PT boat story that had needed to be told, wooden warship building on the home front during World War II, and the Schooner America story. So I worked pretty hard in the narrative to bring these together in an elegant way. hopefully you'll have a chance to read and give me some feedback on that. So the schooner yacht America was built over the winter of 1850 into 1851 on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, on the edge of the East River. And she was built specifically for the purposes of competition. So this was a racing yacht from the start. The design brief was as ambitious as it was clear. She must be able to cross an ocean on her own keel. She must be blazingly fast and able to win on closed course races and on open course races. And she must be proper and elegant and well fitted enough that the leading men of society and perhaps even British royalty could step aboard her and feel comfortable. So they brought in a young, ambitious yacht designer called George Steers, who had been designing some of the more successful pilot boats out of New York Harbor, and they put him on it. They put a boat builder called William Brown on it, and a syndicate of sportsmen from Manhattan financed this. Their goal, these were gamblers. They loved the idea of doing things and gambling on it. So a lot of horse racing for money and yacht racing for money. So this is before we had fantasy football, before we had Monday Night Football or professional sports of any sort. So horse racing and, to a lesser extent, but equally passionate, yacht racing were gambling features for this wealthy set.
Love
so
that.
America, as she was being built, a warm invitation came from the Royal Yacht Squadron in Cowes, England, saying, "We understand you have a yacht under construction. Please join us at Cowes on the southern coast of England this coming summer for the yachting season. We will welcome you as a fellow yachtsman and fellow gentlemen, and bring your yacht over here and let's see how she does." And the syndicate was interested in the sporting part of it. They were interested in the adventure part of it. They also thought they could get this schooner across the Atlantic and win some money. They thought they could get over there and take on all comers and have some betting, some gambling on the racing. Never was there a plan that America was anything other than an instrument for that coming summer. And in fact, you can imagine, based on these gentlemen's history, there probably would be another yacht in 1852 and probably another one in 1853 or another iteration. So she was built, with just this coming summer in mind. A big high-profile build, featured in newspapers. Here she is being launched into the East River, as featured in a newspaper a couple months after her launch. The site of where America was built, the William Brown Shipyard, is on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and it does not exist anymore. It's for those that are familiar with Manhattan, it is roughly where 10th and 11th Street meet FDR Drive. Alphabet City is what you would call it. Interestingly, there's a public pool and public park on the site that are called the Dry Dock Pool and Park down there, which is where the William Brown Dry Dock was. It's 1,000 feet from the shoreline now. So I've actually gone over there looking for some remnants of the William Brown Shipyard, and other than that name Dry Dock, there's nothing left. But this is roughly where America was launched in May of 1851, and she is very simply rigged. So here's a Melbourne Smith image that I think captures her very well. You can see she's got a long flat run aft. She's got a relatively sharp bow, a very elegant tucked stern there, which I think is lovely. This rig, very simple, could be sailed by a shorthanded crew without a lot of drama, multiple sail combinations, as you can see. The dramatically raked masts are one of the features that you can always recognize America from in this era. And at some point along the way, she was painted black, which was a little bit, I like to think, a little bit of a thumbing the nose. This menacing black yacht being built. She was launched in her primer coat. By the time she was racing in Cowes, she was painted black. Probably a couple iterations, some in New York and some of that in Europe as she got there. So this is the closest we have, in my opinion, to an 1851 view of America's sail plan. I will note, just because I know we've got some experts on here, I spoke aboard the Pride of Baltimore a couple of weeks ago on this topic, and this is an 1814 Baltimore Clipper sail plan. I'll note, while these vessels were built for very different purposes, there are some degrees of similarity between them. And the dramatically raked mast, probably the most recognizable, moves the center of effort on the sails aft, closer to the rudder for better control, and lower, meaning you can carry more sail and keep your balance. So both vessels holding on with this dramatically raked mast look. You see the hull form is very similar, above decks especially, and the dimensions are actually somewhat similar in terms of length and width and even height of the masts. Peter Boudreau, very well known in the schooner community, I know, and an Annapolis resident, is retired from his schoonering activity and doing some painting in his retirement, and he has painted this incredible image. So this is America leaving New York and heading across the Atlantic in the summer of 1851 for the delivery. America made it across the Atlantic in 19 days. Just to put that in perspective, a typical passenger carrying sailing ship of the area would average about 40 days on an Atlantic crossing. The fastest steamships of the era were about 11 days, the very fastest state-of-the-art steamship. So America's 19-day crossing was a revelation. She bolted across. I will note she is having delivery sails flying at this point. Her racing sails are carefully stowed below. So no expense spared on this vessel. She is the first yacht sent across an ocean specifically for the purposes of competition. So she's headed over to have a summer of adventure on the southern coast of England. Hopefully win her owners some money. They can have some fun. They can come back with some stories, and the yacht is a vehicle for these ambitions. So as we know, the August 1851 story of America is very widely known, widely told. In the book, I breeze through it relatively quickly. There have been oceans of ink written about what happened on August 22nd, 1851. There are literally minute to minute, hour to hour accounts of sail changes and what they ate for lunch, and what music was playing when they crossed the finish line, etc. But the cut to the chase, spoiler alert, is it was blazingly fast, won a clockwise race around the Isle of Wight on August 22nd, 1851, beating the best yachts that the British could roll out there, soundly beating them, to the point where Queen Victoria, who was watching the race, is said to have asked her signalman who's winning, and the signalman said, "America, ma'am, and Your Majesty," and she said, "Who's in second?" And he replied, "There is no second place." So we all know that quote. We love that quote. And in fact, Magnus Wheatley, a great British writer, has written an entire book about that quote. So just to show you how deep people go on the 1851 America, there's a book on who was the signalman, what was the circumstances of that, could he have said this, that sort of thing. So this story is written into the fabric of what we do as sailors. This yacht crossing the Atlantic with the ambitions of this young nation and these owners, having this magnificent victory on the highest level of competition with the Queen watching. So it's a well-covered part of her history. Celebrated all over the United States. The reputation of this vessel was quickly established, and as little details came out, like the 19-day crossing and the Queen's, quote, etc., the legend grew. So the owners, for their efforts, here's another image, that was in contemporary culture at the time. The Queen visits the yacht after the race. We have this from the diaries of one of the syndicate participants, who was actually Alexander Hamilton's son. was part of the ownership syndicate. So here's George Schuyler welcoming Her Majesty aboard. You can see that this 1902 image has the wheel fitted. We understand it was a tiller by this point, but here's Her Majesty coming aboard, either well coached or very familiar. She asked a few good questions and made a few good comments. As things happen in schooners and sailing and sailboat racing, there's lots of ancillary stories around the Queen's visit. Three of my favorite are she had her lace glove on and ran her hand along a shelf and checked it for dust, and it was spotless. We have that report after a day of hard racing around the Isle of Wight. We also have a report that commented on the unique way the ballast was stowed down below. So America, as part of her no expense spared design and build, had lead ballast that was fitted to the shape of the bilge to keep it as low as possible. So not just stacked ingots down there, not just stacked ballast stones or bricks or something down there or sacks. This was molded to the shape of the bilge. So the Queen allegedly made a comment about that. And my favorite anecdote from this, passed around in pubs and on deck during late night stories, et cetera, is the royal consort. So the Queen's husband, Prince Albert, at the time, was about to step aboard, and Captain Old Dick Brown, who was the yacht captain, Dick Brown from Mystic, Connecticut, said, "Sir, you'll have to remove your shoes." And the prince began to speak back, and he goes, "I know exactly who you are, sir. Please remove your shoes." And whether these particular stories are true or not, they just add to the legend of the yacht. So for their efforts that afternoon, the syndicate that owned America were presented with a silver trophy that came out of the trophy collection at the Royal Yacht Squadron in Cowes. It had been built by Garrett's, which is the Queen jeweler, the official Queen jeweler. We know this trophy today. It's still sailed for. It's now named America's Cup after the vessel. And in fact, just 5 days ago in the Mediterranean, the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron defended the cup and are currently the possessors of this cup. So we still race for the same cup that those owners were presented with that summer afternoon. Very famous 1987 image of Dennis Conner having gone to Australia and won the regatta, bringing the cup back to the United States. And it's currently, as I said, in the possession of New Zealand. So where does this leave us? Couldn't find a lot of people to race against because everybody knew how fast America was. So there was not going to be a lot of money to be made. So they got this silver trophy. That's pretty cool. They ended up selling the vessel almost immediately afterwards. Made a little bit of a profit on the sale. And she went into British ownership. The owners returned to North America on a steamship and brought their cup with them. And, undoubtedly, as wealthy sportsmen do, began planning their next adventure. So America was only in their ownership for several months. She got knocked around England for the next 10 or so years. So England entered the Crimean War, which stopped all yachting activities for a while. America changed hands a few times. She ended up abandoned on a mud bank about 10 years after the famous victory. A shipbuilder purchased her and refurbed her, and she was purchased by a young Irishman who, exact motivations unknown, got in league with the Confederate States of America. And during the American Civil War, sailed America back across the Atlantic onto the southeastern coast of the United States and put her in the service of the Confederate States of America's Navy. So America, let's call it what she is. She's blazingly fast, nimble when well sailed. She can be sailed by a shorthanded crew. So those are some pluses. On the downside, she's very recognizable. You take a glance at her profile and you know it. And she had been in the media. She had been in the press. So people would know who this vessel is. She does not have a lot of room aboard for cargo, for people, or for things, or for guns. She so she can't carry a lot. She's not been built structurally to carry big heavy guns, etc. So she begins service as a blockade runner, going in and out of southern Confederate ports, which were blockaded by the Union Navy. So Charleston, the Jacksonville, the St. Johns River, Fernandina, etc. So she begins going in and out. Now, blockade running during the Civil War often involved passages between Nassau, Bermuda, and those southern points. Not great records. The Confederate Navy did not keep great records of this activity for obvious reasons. The records that were kept were often destroyed, towards the end of the war. So we don't have a lot of records of America as a blockade runner in the service of the Confederacy. We have some anecdotal accounts of what she did, and we know well that blockade, how it was set up, and the way blockade runners worked. We also know that one summer, the war, 2 Confederate agents, you could call them spies if you were writing a book promotional blurb, 2 Confederate agents boarded America and were carried to Ireland and eventually to England on a diplomatic mission on behalf of the Confederate States of America. So America now is serving in a war, on the side of the Confederate States. This is the area of operation where she was. Specifically, let's zoom in here. So we have the southeastern coast of the United States, Port Royal, which was a Union base led by Samuel DuPont, Savannah, which was largely a Confederate base, and Jacksonville, which interestingly, the area around Jacksonville was never, especially the port, never firmly committed to either side in this Civil War. They were interested in trade coming in and out of the St. Johns River. They were not as interested in any ideologies. They wanted to keep their port open, and whoever was coming and going, they wanted to support. So the St. Johns River, which runs from Mayport all the way down past Palatka and down deeper into the interior of Florida, the St. Johns River changed hands multiple times during the Civil War. It would be in Union hands for a day or two, and then it would flip over and be in rebel hands for a day or two. So when the Union finally got their act together and moved into the river to take Jacksonville for good, America was trapped on the inside. So you have this iconic vessel of some utility for a military operation, but more symbolic, trapped in Jacksonville as the Union Navy, the American Navy, makes its way up the St. Johns River to Jacksonville. So it's clear Jacksonville is going to fall, the Union is going to occupy, and the game is over of this back and forth. So what happens to America at this point? Well, she was valuable to the Confederacy, as a blockade runner and as a messenger ship, sure, but she was also, very symbolically valuable to them. They have this treasure of the United States in their fleet, operating in their fleet. So as Jacksonville is falling to the Union, they put a teenage boy, local, aboard America, and they instruct him, take her up the river and hide her so we can keep her from the Union, and we'll get her out at some other day. So this young man called Charles Hemmings takes America many miles up the river, about 60 miles up the river, and drills 5 holes in her bottom and sinks her in an attempt to hide her. So not to scuttle her forever, but just to sink her. They would replug the holes, pump her out, and someday she would sail again. So he goes up the river and does this. Unfortunately, where she is sunk is not very deep. So a whole side is out of the water. There are spars appearing out of the water. We know this because there's Union records who did keep superb records of a group led by a Navy officer from Connecticut named Thomas Stevens, who went up the river and retrieved America, refloated her, and brought her out of the river and returned her to Port Royal, where she was cleaned up. So a fascinating story. I dive fairly deep into that. Now she's in the service of the Union Navy. You would think you have this yacht that is something of a national treasure, you would think at that point you might take this yacht and put her somewhere safe, Annapolis or perhaps New York or Boston or Newport, somewhere far away from the war. She still had some utility. So the Union cleaned her up, gave her a new set of sails, mounted a gun on her bow, and put her as a blockader in Charleston, South Carolina, right off Rattlesnake Shoal. So America operated on the blockade in Charleston for the Union Navy, for almost a year, and had some fascinating service there. Was involved in some captures there. Was in the middle of the action in Charleston. Finally, cooler heads prevail. America is sent north in late 1862 for a refit in Charlestown, Massachusetts. This is likely the first photographic image of America. I've never been able to find anything older, nor have any other researchers. So she's getting refit in 1862 in Charlestown. At this point, it's fair to say America has been ridden hard and put away wet. We are 11 years after that famous victory with the Queen on her decks, and Schuyler and Hamilton, proud owners. And she has been abandoned on a mud bank. She has been sunk and raised. She's had guns mounted on her bow. She's fought in a war for both sides of the war. And, she needs a break at this point, right? She needs a good airing out and a good break at this point. She's sent to the Naval Academy, which during the Civil War was relocated to Newport, Rhode Island, to get it away from Annapolis, where there was a lot of Southern sympathizers. When the war ended, this is a wonderful image of America and Constitution, which was part of the Navy fleet at that point, returning to Annapolis from Newport. So with Fort Adams in the background there off of America's boom, she's crossing Constitution's bow, and they're making their way back to Annapolis. Just an incredibly evocative and incredible image to me. The war's over. We can bring our fleet back. Spend some time in Annapolis as a training vessel for the Academy. And we're going to move to a quick stoppage here. Duncan.
This is a pitch to ask you to join us at the American Schooner Association. Founded in 1972, the American Schooner Association is dedicated to the history, preservation, and promotion of the schooner rig. You don't need to be a schooner owner to join the organization, just to be interested in these beautiful boats. As time marches forward, the role that schooners played in the history of our country is fading too. Your membership helps support educational programs and provides a base for preserving these vessels. So, join us. It's inexpensive, important, and we'd love to have you along. We'll see you at amschooner.net.
And there you go. A little bit about us. Now, David, you have
So good.
you've just brought the boat back to Annapolis, haven't you?
Yes, sir. And that was great. If we have to have commercials, that's a pretty awesome one. So,
God bless you.
so America's back at Annapolis at the Naval Academy. Let's again get real here for a second. The Naval Academy didn't necessarily ask for this schooner. In this era, very interested in converting to steam, which is going to be the future technology that powers this Navy. And at the same time, a gentleman from Massachusetts called Benjamin Butler steps into the picture. Anybody that's familiar with New Orleans during the Civil War and the story of New Orleans knows about the Beast Butler. He was the occupier of New Orleans. He was the governor of Massachusetts. He ran for president 3 different times in 3 different parties and lost all 3 times. But he was a yachtsman. He also was a very accomplished attorney and knew his way around maritime law. And he ended up buying America from the United States Navy, from the United States government. It's a little bit shady, in my opinion, how those transactions happened. He challenged the way that America was captured from the Confederacy. legally. And my take is that the federal authorities just gave up and just said, "Okay, you win, sir." So he bought America out from the government. Now, the good news is that General Butler is an incredible steward of this schooner. He's exactly who you want owning the schooner if it can't be in the care of the United States Navy. So he lavishes attention on it. He hires Donald McKay to design a new rig and new sail plan, and he redoes the vessel multiple times. He goes sailing on it all over the place. He paints it white. He has her in Cuba. He has her in Bermuda. He has her in the Caribbean. He has her on the scene as the America's Cup is defended in New York City, in New York Harbor. And he's a great owner for the vessel. This image right here is from 1898 in Gardner's Bay, New York. She's taking a group of Spanish-American War veterans out for a rehabilitation sail, not unlike some of the veteran sailing projects we have today, which are so great. So Butler dies, and his heirs take over the vessel. They work to try to maintain it to the same standards, but now America is approaching 50 plus years old. Again, despite the general's lavish spending on her, she needs constant money. She needs constant attention. She needs constant care. And the heirs of Butler just don't have the wherewithal, the resources, the stamina to do this. So they put her up for sale, which is, the 1920 era. They're done with her. She's covered in Boston, floating mournfully, as one report said. You wouldn't even know this was the yacht that won the cup, waiting for some future that would come along. So enter Sir Thomas Lipton, the Brit, who challenged for America's Cup 5 times and never won, but was obsessed with the cup. This was his white whale that he could never capture. Lipton was rumored to be interested in buying America, which began to get the attention of some historically minded yachtsmen. Same time as she's for sale, the word goes out that a group of merchant traders from Portugal are interested in buying America and converting her into a trading packet to ply the North Atlantic. So she may be 70 years old at this point, but she's still fast enough and has enough utility that someone would consider buying her and turning her into a trading packet. That was enough at that point. Lipton and the potential to become a trading packet were enough. A group of yachtsmen from the Eastern Yacht Club, Marblehead/Boston, put together a fund led by Charles Francis Adams, and they buy America from the Butler heirs. In the late summer of 1921, America is towed from Boston to Annapolis. The United States Navy vessel tows her. I was actually contacted the grandchildren of the photographer of this image, who gave me permission for it to be in the book. Just an incredible image. So here's America on her triumphant tour down the East Coast, stopping at major yachting centers, including Newport and Larchmont and Cape May, Baltimore, et cetera, Philadelphia, Baltimore, et cetera, as she ends up at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. So here's another picture from the Leslie Jones collection of America making her way south. At Annapolis, America is pulled into the Dewey Basin, and the superintendent of the Naval Academy pays Charles Francis Adams a token of $1 for this vessel. The brigade of midshipmen is gathered around, the Navy band plays, and America is now back in the hands of the United States Navy. Again, the context is important. The United States Navy did not ask for this vessel. The skills to maintain a now 70-year-old schooner that had been ridden hard and put away wet and not cared for the prior 20 years did not exist at scale in the United States Navy. Everybody was focused between the wars on other things, not on historic schooners. So America sits there at the Academy, literally sits for 20 years in a slip. And I'll do a quick, this is Annapolis, zooming in on the United States Naval Academy, zooming in a bit more on the United States Naval Academy, Santee Basin, where the Navy sailing fleet is kept, if you're familiar with that. So this was the shoreline at the time, 1921. Santee Basin, the Dewey Basin, which is clearly now a track and a field. America sat right there in that corner, right on the corner of the where the track is today. If you were to stand here and look out towards the river, this is what you would see for 20 years. So there's America at the Naval Academy. You can recognize that lovely, graceful stern that we talked about. The masts are decidedly less raked and decidedly less sporty as they had been in earlier iterations. In the lower left corner, just off the boom, you can spot a seaplane. For those of you that like that Severn River Naval Academy seaplane stories, there's a seaplane. So America was occasionally dressed up with signal flags, but mostly just sat. Her gangplank literally bolted to the pier. She was a photo backdrop for midshipmen. I interviewed a gentleman who was a boy growing up in downtown Annapolis in this era, and he said we used to walk over and play pirate on her deck and run around, and it was our favorite destination to go and do that. Again, here is a between the wars image of the Naval Academy. A lot of landfill has expanded that footprint since then, but there's America in her slip tucked away in Dewey Basin. So America right there, 100 yards away at Eastport, interesting activity is beginning to develop. And I'm going to hit this very quickly. There's a wooden boat building facility at Eastport in this era. It had been called the Chance Yacht Construction Company. That went down during the Depression. Some entrepreneurs from New York came in and took it over and renamed it the Annapolis Yacht Yard. It later became the Trumpy facility, which operated into the 70s. So this is the footprint of it. The Chart House restaurant is the covered shed out into the water. This is what it looks like today. I'm actually coming to you from one of the buildings up on shore there in this image. In the late 30s, it was a wooden boat building operation. Sleepy, high ambition, but not not on the scale of a Hairsoft or something along those operations. You can see again here, this is Spa Creek in Annapolis in the foreground and Back Creek in the background, and the village of Eastport in between. They're trying to build production motor yachts in this place. The goal of the entrepreneurial owners is to come up with a single design and use Detroit-style production lines and crank out a lot of the same design. It's in fits and starts. So they begin taking on repair work, and this ends up helping fund the operation is repair work. They did produce a couple of incredibly elegant and gorgeous yachts between the end of the Depression and the beginning of their warship building. Here's a couple of examples, just spectacularly gorgeous yachts built in Annapolis. In 1938, the Sewanna comes here. So this is a 56-foot schooner built in Maine that was often associated with James Roosevelt, President Roosevelt's son. So he would charter this vessel. He sailed this vessel a lot. The president sailed a lot on this vessel, did a 108-mile sail across the Gulf of Maine and the Bay of Fundy while he was president. So isn't that incredible? Just think about that. The president of the United States going off the grid for a 108-mile sail on a 56-foot schooner. Just incredible to think about. In 1938, James Roosevelt brought the Sewanna to the Annapolis Yacht Yard for some repairs. They were a well-known wooden boat repair facility. What young Roosevelt makes relationships with the owner, and he reports back to his father, President Franklin Roosevelt, that there's a fine wooden boat facility at Annapolis called the Annapolis Yacht Yard. This gets Roosevelt's attention. President Roosevelt was a naval historian. He loved sea stories. He served in the Navy. He worked in the Navy office, obviously, as a civilian. He was an accomplished sailor, and he knew about America, and he knew about America's story. He knew it very well. He treasured America, and his vision was to restore America and have her be one of the centerpieces of a Navy museum on the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. So he came up with the idea that we will send America across the creek to this nearby yacht wooden boat facility and have them check her out and do some work on her. So this is what the facility looked like in the late 1930s, early 1940s. 3 marine railways, windy, high tide. In December of 1940, America is hauled from Spa Creek and blocked where I have this yellow rectangle. It's the last time she will touch the water. First-hand accounts of her being hauled, she'd been in the water for more than a decade, she smelled. There was a rank smell went out across the yard, rotting wood, slime, etc. At the same time, the yard workers, and I have some first-hand accounts, say they were struck by her beauty even as she came out of the water that night, under the yellow lights on this windy king tide of an evening. The next day, this is a great, for the last time she is hauled. Here's a yachting magazine photo, but just a gorgeous picture that Lawrence Hartshey, a friend of mine, took as a teenager with a Brownie camera. I thought this was a spectacular picture, just looks like art, more than anything. But the Navy sends over a survey crew to get the president a report on the state of the ship. And these are some images they took that are over at the Nimitz Library. They also exist in the National Archives. So here's America hauled at Eastport. Do a very thorough survey of her. You can see there's a much lesser wooden eagle on the stern there. Boston still listed as the hailing port. The railway visible on the left side. So she has been skidded off the railway. They expect her to stay for a while. Just another picture of her, a survey picture. Under her bow there, you can see the Carroll House and St. Mary's Church for the Annapolitans who are looking for some degree of a reference. I'm going to skip this Ship of Theseus section just for time, but the short version is, if you have an old vessel like this and you have a massive rehabilitation needed, and you start pulling off rotted wood, and you keep pulling off rotted wood and replacing it with new wood, at what point does it become a new ship? At what point does the identity flip and it's no longer America? Is it when 50% of the wood is off? Is it when 100% of the wood is off? Does it always retain that identity? It's a philosophical question that is known as the Ship of Theseus paradox. So this is an image of the Ship of Theseus. So we're going to take you to the final chapters of America after this break.
It's a 127-mile overnight race from Annapolis, Maryland to Norfolk, Virginia. It's a celebration of a race to market from an age that has passed into history, a time when the Chesapeake Bay hosted passenger steamers and was peppered with working boats and pleasure craft, all under sail. This is an invitation to take part in a celebration, an invitation to get out on the bay, strut your stuff, spend time with friends, and put some wind in the sails of your beautiful boat. This is an invitation to join the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race. After more than 35 years, the Schooner Race has decided to add an invitational class for non-schooner boats that would like to join us in the fun. Now, whether you have a schooner or classic vessel that harkens back to that age of sail, we're inviting you to join us. This race runs the length of the bay, and participants encounter all sorts of different conditions. It's challenging, and it's a great deal of fun. From the parade of sail in Baltimore's Inner Harbor, to the crack of the starting cannon off Annapolis, to the early morning finish at Thimble Shoal Light at the mouth of Hampton Roads, this is a race designed to celebrate your rig, whether classic yawl, ketch, sloop, workboat, or schooner. It's a chance to test your skills and enjoy the camaraderie of new friends and old. It's a chance to be part of something big and something meaningful. As an invitational class, the criteria are simple. If you have a vessel, modern or not, which is reminiscent of the age of schooners, you are welcome to join us. In addition, if you or your organization have a mission compatible with ours, promoting awareness of the Chesapeake Bay's heritage and ecology, and or preserving these historic vessels, you'd be welcome to join us too. Applications will be considered by our race committee, and if they feel that your boat or organization would fit our parameters, you're in for a wonderful experience. Join us. Let's get your boat on the line. Or if you know of anyone else who might fit our criteria, send this over to them. Let's keep this great event alive, and let's give back to those who live along our shores. Join us for the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race. It's a ride to remember. To find out more about the race and our mission of supporting not-for-profit organizations on and around the Bay, please visit us at gcbsr.org.
Life is good, yeah. Life is good, yeah. Yeah, in my darkest times, you got me feeling like I've been walking on air. Left all my worries and cares. I've got no burdens around you. I don't care who knows I love you. 'Cause I've been so lost without you. And in my darkest times, you got me feeling like
And there you go. Another shame.
Very cool.
2 victims. Thank you.
Very cool. You've got a good voice for that, Duncan. I recognize
you're
your
a good
voice
guy.
there.
Thank you, man. Hey, let's catch
Yeah,
up
this
where
is
we
good.
were, okay?
Yeah. So let's keep pressing ahead. So, in the meantime, while America's hauled and being assessed, the Annapolis Yacht Yard very quickly, very effectively becomes a vital partner with the United States Navy building wooden warships. So, after Pearl Harbor, even before Pearl Harbor, but really after Pearl Harbor, the United States Navy actively goes out into the world and begins working with private yacht yard and yacht building facilities to convert them to shipbuilding activities. The Annapolis Yacht Yard was perfect for building 110-foot sub chasers, which we see here being launched at Eastport at the facility in 1942 with the Maryland State House in the background. And they were perfect to build 70-foot patrol torpedo boats, which we call PT boats in the United States. British patrol torpedo boats. These vessels were destined for our allies as part of the Lend-Lease program. So they were destined for the patrol torpedo boats, destined for the Royal Navy and for the Soviet Navy, allies of the United States. So the Yacht Yard finally gets to do its Detroit-style production. Does it instead of building lovely motor yachts, it's building 70-foot patrol torpedo vessels. So this is a shot inside what's known as the Big Shed. This building still stands in the Eastport section of Annapolis. And you can see 6 70-foot patrol torpedo boats being built simultaneously. Here's the next phase. This shot is actually taken out of the window in my office just to the right by the naval officer there. These are double planked hulls over oak frames. Much of the work in the pilot house and the bandstand up top there is made with marine plywood that they built on site here at Annapolis. In the center of that, the far end of the shed, you can see there's a large door open out onto Spa Creek where these vessels are launched into. So throughout World War II, more than 100 of these 70-footers are built for the Royal Navy and for the Soviet Navy. This was a very important production partner. Unfortunately, this is bad news for here's the first one going in May 1942, where torpedo tubes have not been fitted yet. See the Naval Academy in the background. These patrol torpedo boats capture the imagination of the American public. They capture the imagination of sailors in the Navy. They are very fast. The Annapolis boats can go 46 knots, powered by 3 Packard engines. They're very maneuverable. They pack a hard punch with 2 torpedoes and guns on deck. And in terms of popular culture, these become a symbol of America fighting back. So you have the powerful symbol of aircraft carriers, but you have these nimble, fast patrol torpedo boats. So the crew on the ground at Annapolis were very proud of what they were doing. During the war, they advertised this in the yachting magazines, very aggressive images of these patrol torpedo boats running. And this is bad news for our favorite. As this is all happening, and this production work is celebrated in Washington, D.C., and London, and everywhere in between. Our poor schooner is sitting here being ignored because all resources are on the patrol torpedo boat building. There's a war to win, a world to save, and this is a vital part of that. More than 400 workers working here at Annapolis. It was the largest private employer in town, often visited by admirals and other Navy brass, etc. America was it was an interesting project, but it was a little bit of a distraction. And the issue was that every time the leaders of the Annapolis Yacht Yard would contact the Navy brass on the subject of America, they were told to keep working on it. No one wanted to cross Roosevelt. This was a pet project, was the understanding. And in fact, I got to meet with and speak with a gentleman who was a 24-year-old Navy ensign and later lieutenant on the scene here. And he called Washington and said, or he contacted Washington and asked, can we pause work on America, please? We have PT boats to build. And was told, not only no, but hell no. Yes. Can I ask why? They said, Franklin wishes it so. So Roosevelt stayed interested in America throughout. We do not have a lot of Roosevelt on the record on this subject. It probably would have been a bit of a bad PR moment, as we would say in 2024, if we're off, we need these vessels to fight the war, but the president has a pet project going on at the same time. The reality is that the guys at the yacht yard knew they needed to build these vessels and that America could wait. So they built a temporary housing over America. They built a shed over America to keep the sun off of her, keep the rain off of her, and not let her deteriorate anymore. Unfortunately, on Palm Sunday, 1942, there was a heavy snowstorm and that shed collapsed onto America. And this is the first image we have, snow still on the ground of what that looks like. Not much left compared to those survey images. People on the ground that saw her said it was impossible to tell what wood was from the shed and what wood was from America. She's been cleaned up a little bit here. But here's some more images of America post shed collapse, the city dock of Annapolis in the background there. Another image post shed collapse. So, I'm not an expert wooden boat builder. I'm sure there's a few on the call here. This doesn't look very good to me at all. Meanwhile, business continues. This is a vital production partner. So here we have probably my favorite image of this whole thing is the big shed in the background, which still stands. America looking rough. A couple months after the shed collapse, you can see one fresh frame in there. And a patrol torpedo boat has just been launched. And we have Navy brass and the leaders of the Annapolis Yacht Yard celebrating that launch with America there as an embarrassing backdrop. Fast forward a couple of years. This is the Annapolis Yacht Yard at the peak of its powers. America is in that windowless shed. So if you see the pier with 5 patrol torpedo boats rafted alongside of it, and you follow that pier in, there's a windowless shed, the lowest of the sheds. America is there. I'll note when I study this picture, there is no big opening on that shed for her to eventually come out of. There are no skylights in there to provide workers with light as they work on the vessel. In fact, there's just one small door in there. So, America's fate at this point was pretty much sealed. The war ends. Annapolis Yacht Yard is keen to get into its post-war production. They want to take what they've learned on the patrol torpedo boats and put them into a new class of yachts. And they were very keen to do this. They had an incredibly well-trained workforce. They had all the most modern equipment. They knew how to do things fast and properly for a very demanding client, the United States Navy. They were going to transfer this into their yacht building. Some changes on the ownership structure. The Trumpy firm eventually comes in. America is broken up. In the winter of 1946, Roosevelt is dead. There is no appetite in the Navy to try to rehabilitate America. The yacht yard, again, keen to move on. And America gets broken up by a clamshell crane and hauled off the remains to the local dump. The Navy saves some material to build a model out of. Lots of locals get involved in pulling souvenirs out of the rubble, including this piece here. My favorite story about the wood, and there's a whole couple chapters about this in the book, is some locals were pretty mad about it because they didn't know exactly how bad of shape she was in, and they couldn't believe the Navy just abandoned America. Some other locals found out where the wood had been dumped, literally drove out to the city dump and dug through the day's garbage and pulled out planks and sections of America, which they cleaned up and have treasured. And my guess is that this hunk of wood that I have is part of that came out of the dump. So the physical form of America is gone 90 years later. And again, I'll reiterate, she was not built to last. She was built for the transactions of 1851. So it's incredible that after that checkered path, she ends up, well into the 20th century, still floating. And then eventually here at the Annapolis Yacht Yard, where this extraordinary warship building was taking place. So, it was a bit of a miracle that she was alive. The culture of saving historic vessels was just beginning. Mystic Seaport had just done the Morgan, for example. The Constitution had just been done in Boston, led by Charles Francis Adams. So it was still a new idea. And, after that shed collapse, there wasn't much to save. So fast forward, I know some of our viewers are familiar with this vessel. This was the first reproduction of America, launched May 3rd, 1967, the anniversary date of the 1851 launch. This vessel is currently in Italy being restored. I've been in touch with the group that's restoring it. They're very interested in the story in the book, obviously. This is what is often known in the sailing community as the Schaefer boat. So this vessel was built as a publicity project by the Schaefer Brewing Company. So in her initial years, she represented Schaefer beer. I know many people on this call probably know some folks that sailed on her, and maybe you did yourselves. Fred Hecklinger, who was the guy that brought me the wood, sailed on this vessel as a young man. A second one that some of our readers are likely familiar with was built in Albany, New York, by Scarano, operating in San Diego, California. This vessel was on the East Coast for a while. It was in Key West for a while. She's incredibly gorgeous reproduction, actively sailed. She's certified to carry up to 85 passengers. I've had the opportunity to sail aboard this vessel, and it's a very special vessel. I will point out, while she looks, and is America personified, in the stern, slightly different. I've pointed out a couple of times that sweeping, elegant stern on the 1851 vessel. Modern times, lessons learned. She is built to Coast Guard standards now. So safety standards, which the 1851 vessel certainly would not have passed. She has a engine in the back and a master stateroom in the stern there. So a little bit of a difference. But this vessel is sailing today and incredibly well run. They have a copy of the book in the ship's library, which makes me very happy because it's an honor to be associated with that. Here's some contact details for me. first book, again, Thomas Point Shoal Lighthouse. The America book is available all the online places you can buy books. You know what those are. It's available there. The Annapolis Maritime Museum has them for sale on their website and in their store. So if you want to support the museum, that's a great way to get a copy of the book as well. So I will end it there. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. Any feedback, questions, comments, etc.
And there you go. My friends, we have an open Q&A box, and we also have the comments open. I believe David and I are able to look at these comments and run through it. First comment, cheers to Fred. He is missed. I actually knew Fred pretty well myself, too. He was amazing. Great presentation. I've been aboard the 95 America when she lives in Alexandria. Enjoyed reading the Thomas Point book. Having just finished.
Yeah, that 95 America was built for a Alexandria restaurateur who was a fan of the story. And, I applaud him. That's how he wanted to spend his money. So it was on and around the bay, and it's been a lot of time in Key West. So I think a lot of our, she's been around, let's say that.
Yeah, absolutely true about that. Looks like we've got a local here. Thanks so much. There is so much more to these classic boats. Stories upon stories, history on history. I grew up in Annapolis on the Bay. In the past few years, had the privilege to sail on Pride 2 twice. It's an amazing experience for people who love it so much. It's a real symbol of where we live today, isn't it? I got a great talk. PowerPoint was great too. Proud of you, say Connie and John Robinson.
These are good.
Of course.
All right, this is nice. I appreciate it. And thank you. So I will say this, because here's a question I get asked a lot. Two questions. A lot of people have hunks of wood from America, or what's purported to be. There's yachting trophies around the Chesapeake Bay. There's some mantelpieces at yacht clubs and sailing clubs that are made of America, et cetera. Yeah, I often get asked, is my piece of America real? And Fred Hecklinger had a great answer to that. First Lawrence Harchey said, if you take all the supposed hunks of America and put them together, you could build a fleet of them, which I thought was pretty funny. But Fred's point was, there was a lot of material around. Those guys pulled planks out of the dump, and then the owners of the yacht yard would give hunks away to VIPs and visitors as they visited the yacht yard. So, but most importantly, it's the spirit of it. So you have a hunk of wood that's purported to be from America. It could be 1942 wood put in by the Annapolis Yacht Yard. It could be 1851 original material. It could be from the Butler era. That doesn't matter. The spirit of what you have is what matters. And if it's a 1942 hunk of wood, that's pretty darn cool, given what those guys did at that point. You can walk around. The other question I get is, you can walk around the site of the Annapolis Yacht Yard / Trumpy. You can. There is no marker where America was, but you'll be able to figure it out based on these slides. There are a couple historic markers up celebrating the boat building that was done here. And if you pop into the Chart House restaurant, that was the finishing shed where they finished those patrol torpedo vessels, and it's now been converted into a restaurant. So that was built in 1942. So that's a great spot.
And here's another great comment from a friend of ours. Thanks so much for the great talk in history. I do also have one piece of the plank from her that I treasure. Thanks, friends, from Steve, Utah.
Yeah, Steve, that's look, I'm going to be a little corny here, but I spent a lot of time with this book. Like, this thing sat on my desk the whole time I wrote the book, and I treasure this a little bit. I don't even bring it to talks anymore because I worry about it. But again, I don't know if this is 1851 or 1942, but I think the physical bits are pretty neat to hang on to.
Nice. Here's one from Rich Bureau. I have a picture of my wife standing next to the cup when it was at the Lowe's Hotel for a sailboat show. Well, good for them.
The cup has visited Annapolis. The cup itself has been here. It was at the boat show. Yeah.
Cool. Amy Harris asks you, are there boat models of America? Any local in the clubs here? So
there are models of America all over the place. Plastic models often. It's one of the kits that you can go out and buy. The model that is was made by the Navy with the actual wood immediately afterwards, is at the Nimitz Library at the Academy. But almost anywhere you see ship models, you'll see America models. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you're going to be able to spot it now. She's going to be black. She's going to have 2 dramatically raked masts. She's going to have a round cockpit. So those are your hallmarks that you're going to be able to spot America on. And hopefully all of you folks will be the experts in your group when you spot one at a restaurant in the future.
And that's fantastic. Let's see what else we got, and then I'll let you go here. I first heard you speak on the Woodwind about Thomas Point Lighthouse. You're a phenomenal, very knowledgeable speaker. Kudos to you. Whoa.
That's nice. And I see, thank you, Janet. And I see my old pal, Nicholas Alley left a comment. Nick, I watched your Sea Story episode and enjoyed it very much. And it was great to catch up with you virtually on that one. So thanks. And this has been a great opportunity. I appreciate it. And support of the book. I aim to do more projects like this, but this one was near and dear to my heart, and always will be. So I really appreciate the support.
Absolutely. And I also want to thank you very much, David, for bringing in Annapolis so well. You've been a wonderful member of our community for so many years, and with Spin Sheet and Prop Talk and all that great stuff you've done. This is a wonderful way to celebrate who we are and where we are. And again, ladies and gentlemen, the book is amazing. Last Days of the Schooner America by David Gendell. And David, I want to thank you so much for joining us, okay?
Thank you, Duncan. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, guys. And while you're at it, if you think of somebody else I ought to talk to, drop me an email. Thanks so much, everyone.